For the record, I have beaten the knight 4 times, but I did have to cut out like 2 of the 3 losses because of time reasons, and also this is my video, so the frog can fuck it. Hello everyone, been a while since the last ramble, and with a while, I think it was like the third last video on the channel. I swear I'm not gonna just do rambles now. It's just an easy video format to work with, and I wanted to make a speed paint and then release it, but I also know that if I use music, it's getting copyrighted, so you know what? You're gonna have me yapping instead. So about 2 weeks ago, there was a promotional video on Fangamer on like different merch for different subjects, and the 2 subjects that came up obviously are Undertale and Deltarune, and the Chapter 3 poster got a bit of attention in the Deltarune section because it's kind of started a bit of a discourse about how this chapter really represents Chapter 3 at its core, which some people take it as a positive and some people took it more of a very negative direction. And before I really get into it, I just want to talk about the inside of the actual artist, Nina Matsumoto. So the reason why it looks a bit different than the previous chapters is because it is more supposed to look like a variety show kind of poster, like a game show in and of itself. Meanwhile, the other 2 chapters were more like actual movie posters. So that's why the composition is a bit different. That's why it's a lot more simple. And also, can I just say, the compressed preview version that people took screenshots of and stuff, it's doing the actual official poster really dirty. Like, I'm really glad that my yapping session from yesterday got kind of cancelled because now we actually have the official poster, and you can definitely see there's a lot more contrast. You can definitely see a lot more details to it. Not necessarily like details that would have made people more satisfied, but it definitely looks better. There's a lot more color contrast, and it feels definitely a lot more alive in comparison to like the preview one. So I feel like the reaction was a bit overblown in that direction, and you can definitely tell that Nina had quite a very specific vision for this poster, and you can definitely respect that, right? So for whatever I'm going to say at the latter half of this video, I want to make it very clear that my poster is not supposed to replace this poster. This poster, the official poster, is fantastic. It's great. I think there were just a lot of people who had, including me, some specific expectations what the poster should represent and show. But that doesn't mean that the official one is bad, right? And we can have a conversation later about how my poster is kind of failing as well. So we're gonna put that as shaft. But just to make it clear, this poster is great. Please respect Nina Matsumoto and just generally the artist behind Fangamer. They're doing a fantastic job. Please, for the love of God, be civil about this. Anyway, this next section was supposed to be about talking about the poster, but I actually want to talk about the general conversation about the chapters themselves first, because I ended up yapping like 40 minutes about the drawing itself. So maybe if I get exhausted enough in the end, I can make it more of a footnote instead, because that is I gave too much information that was unnecessary. So anyway, I think it's good to like recall as to what the first impression was of Chapter 3, because if you remember, before Chapter 3 and 4 dropped, there have been a lot of like fan concepts. There were a lot of like speculation as to what Chapter 3 is going to be about. I think a good chunk of people kind of correctly assumed that it was going to be a bit game show hosty in that kind of direction. And I think it's also thanks to like the sweepstakes that gave this kind of impression, mostly because of Spamton, who kept on talking about his divorced husband. Which is also really funny, because a lot of people had the impression, because of Spamton, that Tenna was going to be like super evil and being like a really villainous kind of character, and instead we got a little sweetheart, right? He's definitely a very manipulative bitch, but he is a sweet little pupper to me. I don't know. I will say he's not funnier than Queen. Queen is absolutely the funniest character in Deltarune so far, or in combination with Rule's card. But Tenna has a certain warmth to him. He's like a dad who doesn't know what he's doing and just trying his best, right? I adore Tenna to bits. And I swear to God, if my plushie doesn't show up soon, I'm going to fucking hurl. The email says that the plushie is supposed to get shipped at late December, but I don't know what that means, if it's gonna be actually arriving then as well. I swear to God, if it arrives on Christmas Day, I'm going to fucking hurl. Anyway, there was just a general discussion around what chapter 3 is going to be, and a lot of people had, the cowboy, the friend inside me kind of theory. People were speculating who even Tenna is in the first place, if Tenna is maybe Mike at the same time, if they're like supposed to be the same person, or if they're like separate entities. We know now that they're separate entities, but at the time, we didn't fucking know. Generally speaking, I think people had the impression that Chapter 3 was going to be extremely bombastic, extremely story-heavy and stuff, or just bring in, like, the big bads all together. But there was also at the same time the impression it's going to be similar to Chapter 2 with its structure, so Tenna being like almost like the male equivalent of Queen or something. And I think because of that expectation of the amount of fan concept, the amount of fan theories that it had, I think it left some people a little empty when they got through the chapter, because the chapter in and of itself, the direction it takes is very much less about being very story heavy, in the sense that it's advancing the story quite a bit, and it's more like a bit of a flashback chapter if you think about it. Not in the sense of flashback of things that we've actually seen of the game so far, and more so a flashback of like a backstory chapter. I think that's a good way to put it. Because in the chapter in and of itself, we get a lot of information about the Dreamer household, about how bad the divorce is, that their fucking TV got trauma from it. We get some insight about how Chris and Azrael spend a lot of time together, and how it's also being informed by like things like the green room, where the sofas look completely different from each other and mirroring their room in that sense. And then of course there's a lot of stuff about Death's Holiday sprinkled in with like the concert and stuff. So there's generally a lot of stuff going on that is more to do with like a backstory, but in terms of like its actual story structure, it's like very light. It's very repetitive at first, and it's like trying to impress you so hard, but once you decide to go into like the back stages of it, it becomes a little empty. And especially when you don't have the mini games, when you don't have like these extra little arcade games that are going on, it's a very empty feeling chapter, just because outside of these little lore implications and stuff, there's not actually a lot going on in the chapter in and of itself. And I think it really depends from person to person if they're really into that. And the problem also is that now when you replay chapter 3, I think it's actually a lot of fun, because you can play the little mini games and try to get to as high of a rank as possible, like even without like thinking about the sword route or something. It's still fun to try to like get as much stuff out of it as well, especially from like the fucking gacha ball as well. The gumball machine, or whatever it was called. Honestly, I never know what to call this ball machine thing. Ball machine. I should just call it a ball machine. What is wrong with me? Like, it's just a chapter to just play through, to just have little funny mini games. I think it's actually a really nice chapter to get through. I do think, personally, that the TV world chase section is just a little too long. Like, I feel like when you get into it the first time, like when you replay it, when you do it on replay, I think it can be still a lot of fun. And there's still some minor things that bother you with TV World, but I think it's the first playthrough that I think leaves some people a bit bitter. Because, I don't know if you remember my first playthrough, but at least my brain was absolutely fucking melting to a point where I didn't figure out how to get through a very simple puzzle and even restarted the game for it. That was embarrassing. Hope that doesn't happen in Chapter 5. I keep replaying this once in a while for like in the back of my drawing sessions, just to have something to listen to, and sometimes I want to fucking bury myself with how stupid I am. But even not thinking about my absolute stupidity, by the time you actually figure out what to do exactly, a lot of time does pass, and especially when you get to like the second board, it becomes like very repetitive, and to be fair, that's the point. But again, we kind of need to have like a bit of a discussion about whether the intention carries the execution of something, right? And especially when it comes to something like a video game, I feel like there comes in the question, what do you prioritize in a video game? Because I feel like it's gonna depend from person to person. Now, honestly, this is where I think it's a good time to bring up like the general ranking among the chapters, because I think a lot of people have Chapter 3 right now as their least favorite among the chapters, which is really fascinating, because I feel like Chapter 1 in general was generally considered the lower one, just because there was a comparison of Chapter 2, which had so much going on. But because of how it's virtually a little empty, chapter 3 is in a lot of people's last place. And I think that's justified, but I feel like chapter 3 is less objectively the worst one, and I feel like it has more to do with whether or not you fuck with its aesthetic or an intention or not. Because chapter 3 in general kind of breaks off with the tradition that the other chapters have. Chapter 1 was like a pretty good introduction of the world. You have like the very first like very generic fantasy setting of like Alice in Wonderland-esque kind of environment, and you get the first actual introduction to Susie. And it's also the chapter where Lancer is present the most, which is still a fucking tragedy. Lancer should be part of the fan gang. This might be a controversial opinion, but I feel like Lancer should be a lot more present in the story. Just saying, I don't know. He seemed very important to me in chapter 1. I'm just very, very sad about that. Meanwhile, in chapter 2, there's just a vast amount of things you can do in it that is just so overwhelming. And of course, there's also fucking Queen as a character. That's even without going into like the Spanton and the Weird Route thing. Queen single-handedly is one of the reasons I really loved replaying chapter 2 before the other chapters dropped. She is such a fun character to voice. She has such good lines. I can't think of them right now. I'm blanking very hard. But every time she speaks, I want to howl with laughter. She is so goddamn funny. However, if I were to give my own opinion on this, the chapter 2 is just a little too long, in my opinion. I don't know, there's just a lot going on where I feel like there's some things that could have been shaved off a little bit, especially when going into the castle. I'm not necessarily the kind of person to say that the acid tunnel of love should be cut out. I actually like this bit quite a bit. But in terms of like the amount of gameplay time you have to actually complete this chapter, it is a little long to me personally. And then you have chapter 4, which is I think the most story heavy in it because it gives you a bit more of an implication as to what the dark worlds actually represent. Like, yes, the one who makes the dark fountain is absolutely the one who shapes the actual dark world, but I think that the demonstration of the different dark sanctuaries is, I think, the first insight we have about how much a person's memory influence the actual dark worlds themselves. There's also the whole thing with Gerson going on, which is, I think, one of the first times we have like an almost direct parallel to Undertale going on. Like before, I made a whole video about this, but in Deltarune there's just a bunch of references back to Undertale, but never being very direct about it, where you can definitely still chalk it up to just a reference and not necessarily being a direct parallel. But then you get into chapter 4 with Gerson, and you can definitely tell there's so many things that connect one and each other. And we also start to get a little bit more of an interesting insight on Susie, because Susie starts to become more of a fleshed out character. In the first and second chapter, obviously, Susie is still a very prominent character and definitely still very important, but I think it's in chapter 3 and 4 where you really start to see development and you start to get a bit more curious about her background. And while I do think that chapter 3 also gives us a lot of material on Susie in and of itself, in terms of its story, it definitely takes more of a backseat and decides to just have the fan gang just have a lot more fun than anything else. And I think that this is a little bothersome when the story and character interaction, when the character interactions themselves are hard carrying the rest of the chapter. And this is where I want to maybe get a little bit of a hot take in it. I think whether or not you're going to like chapter 3 depends on two factors. One is what you actually prioritize in gaming, because I actually noticed this quite a lot with a few people I know, where it really heavily depends if you prioritize story over gameplay, or if you prioritize gameplay over story. Some people are able to have a balance. I think it's very clear that I personally prefer more the story aspect, and especially character interaction. Those are my jam, and that gameplay to me comes a little second place. Not that I don't enjoy gameplay of it, of course, but to me, in terms of what I prioritize and which chapter I'm going to enjoy more, is always going to have more weight on that side of things rather than its actual gameplay. Now, meanwhile, other people will absolutely focus more on the gameplay in and of itself, and that's, I think, where it starts to feel a little empty, because you can very clearly tell when the game is starting to be very repetitive and such. The second thing, I think, and you might be able to correct me in the comments about what your opinion on this is, but I think the reason why chapter 3 doesn't connect with a lot of people is because the majority of Undertale Deltarune fans are below the age of 18. This is absolutely going to be my most boomer take ever, but I generally don't think people who are like who were like born after 2010 or something are going to appreciate this chapter at all. If you're like older and still don't fuck with chapter 3, then that's fine. Maybe this is just me generalizing a bit more, but the reason why I love chapter 3 personally is because this is the most accurate way I've seen my childhood represented, if that makes any sense. There's so many little things sprinkled in there that I don't think people nowadays are going to really understand or really even have soft memories with. Like, maybe you've probably seen an arcade before in a childhood. Maybe you've had like a friend who had like a basement with like this very specific carpet pattern. Maybe you had like the childhood where someone has like carpet of like houses and streets or something, like I had in my childhood at least. But these are just little things that start to disappear a little bit over time, and I'm not really sure if this is just a childhood that people share with anymore. Now, like the whole concept, I mean, game shows still exist, obviously. Like, I went to the gym the other day, and there was still game shows going on. It's still a thing. Okay, that sounds weird if I don't give context. There's like a little TV screen in front of the machines in the gym, just to make it clear. It's not just a whole goddamn game show going on at the same time of a gym. Would be funny, though. Like, game shows are not necessarily, like, part of, like, the society. It still exists today. But it was very much still an activity that families like watch together. Like, it is something that people actually win. Like the whole concept of having a family activity going on in front of a TV, that in and of itself, I think is not something that a lot of people have in their childhoods anymore, because I think it started around 2010 something, a little after actually, where I don't know if you remember this, but the whole discussion about the iPad kid already started a long time ago, where people got really concerned over people growing up online exclusively, and especially when it came to like irresponsible parents just giving their kid an iPad or something. That was something that was a huge concern over, and I think for a lot of people's childhoods, this is starting to kind of manifest itself into the audience, because I don't think a lot of people are going to have this specific childhood of sitting with family in front of the TV. I'm sure some people still do. I'm not gonna say that no one does this. It's more of like a generalized kind of thing. If you're not within that group, that's fine. But I think there is a very distinct experience with people spending time on the TV together. Like, especially when it comes to like video game. God, do you recall the last time people were able to do couch co-op? That is something that I don't think I've seen in such a long time. It's always just online video gaming, and to be fair, again, I'm not really someone who played a lot of games, but I did absolutely play with my brother on like the PlayStation 2 or 3 to play like Naruto Ninja Storm or something. Just playing a bunch of like fighting games and just do fuck whatever, just shooting my brother from the other side of the map of like a Call of Duty or something. Those were like cherished memories for me. And it's not just that either. Whenever we went to like our cousin's place, my brother and my cousin would sometimes play Mortal Kombat. Not sure why they were allowed to play that, considering that it at least traumatized me whenever I saw blood splattered on the screen. But we're not gonna talk about that. I swear to God, they had like the exact basement aesthetic that the chapter 3 is going for. It is just a wave of nostalgia to me whenever I see like the carpet aesthetic of it all. The whole thing with like the cowboys. The cowboy show is going on. The whole thing with like the weird gumball machine or whatever. The whole thing with the arcade. Ram just taking charge of like the prizes you get from like different little festival games you can play. The whole Susie thing with like punching down different mini games. Like, I don't know if this was for someone else like this, but for some reason I can't quite say what it is about it specifically from my childhood, but something about that felt just so familiar with like just punching down houses and stuff, especially because it's like, again, this one carpet that I think everybody had in their childhoods like this at the time. Like, it has this very specific aesthetic that I think not a lot of people have this type of childhood anymore. And that's why, to me at least, it's very effective, because it actually makes me recall my own childhood a little bit. Which is why areas like the static snow area, I don't actually know what it's called, but the place where it plays glowing snow is so fucking real. just seeing the TV statics in the background and just that everything just going so quiet and realize that everything that was just happening with all the nostalgia blast is just so quiet and there's just nothing going on anymore. Oh, this is just. I think about it and I want to keep crying because of it because this is such a fucking mood. So I guess my take on this is that I feel like this is just a chapter that has a very specific aesthetic to it, and I feel like especially if you didn't grow up with this, it's not gonna connect with you, I feel like. And I think that's fine. I think certain chapters are allowed to be more for a specific target audience rather than to try to please everyone. I think this is just a thing that just happens. Not to say that you're not allowed to criticize it because of it. Obviously, you still can. There's still a conversation about if the intention carries the execution. I'm pretty sure I've said this 3 times, but I like that sentence, okay? In this case, you absolutely can make the argument, I feel like, because... Or I guess the argument against it almost, because I feel like TV World in particular, I feel like when you play it for the first time, I think it's not as bad, but on the replays, when you realize how long TV World in and of itself is, it's trying to keep you in it for as long as possible and trying to show you things multiple times. Something I didn't really notice until I had to go for the chapter 3 egg. How often the TV room hallway gets repeated? I think it's 3 to almost 5 times, actually, the aesthetic in and of itself. And also, as much as I love this bit, we're going to talk about that for the poster, as much as I love the cowboy bit with Ralsei being a goddamn horse, it's a little odd to me, personally, how it's almost twice in there. I don't know if they were just trying to make sure that there's some practice for, when it comes to Tenna's fight with, the physical challenges and this stuff. But that bit definitely felt a little bit like you're trying a bit too hard to make sure that this stays memorable or something. And it can kind of come off as a little redundant. I will say, though, one of my favorite bits in Chapter 3 was actually Tenna's fight in and of itself. I didn't show it much in my own reaction to it, but Tenna's final fight... specifically, especially when there comes the big letters telling you to defeat Tenna, that specifically gave me such a flashback of games that would they try to encourage you in the middle of a video game or something, defeat this character or something. And I don't know, Chapter 3 has such a specific aesthetic to me that I feel like it appeals to me personally, that even if the gameplay is sometimes a bit a bit repetitive. I know now what to do on the boards. The boards are a lot faster to do. And especially, the sword route. The way this chapter is so fundamentally important to inform us about Chris is also another aspect of it that makes going back to it so much more fun, right? The whole idea that of Chris's childhood, about the potential intrusive thoughts that they might be having that may or may not be the reason why they started to get quiet, why they stopped making all these pranks in the first place, or why the whole soul possession thing has even started in the first place, that it might all be connected with each other in some shape or form. In general, I think it's better to look at Chapter 3 rather than looking at it as filler, and more almost like a backstory episode that you would have from anime or something. I feel like it's better to view it that way, where it's a very subtle lore dump on everything. So, as much as I did really love Chapter 2 with its technological stuff and also fucking Queen, Chapter 3, I think I do still prefer it over Chapter 2 just because of the very specific things that it appeals to me personally too, right? And also, I'm sorry, but Rules card is just extremely funny in this. I know some people were a little bit annoyed of it, and on replays I can understand that it gets a little exhausting to have this mandatory fight as intentionally trying to drag things on. But I don't know, man, the whole fucking laser pointer thing, I'm still not fucking over that. In general, I think it's fine if you don't like Chapter 3 as much as the rest of the characters, but I do kind of think that there might be a more specific component to it of disliking it, that it might just be about it just not appealing to specific people, right? I love character interactions, so to me the extra stuff with the fun gang just playing couch co-op together is just going to be very endearing to me, especially with the music rhythm game. And that specifically is such a nice blast of nostalgia with all the rhythm games that they used to exist in back in the day. I mean, they still exist. I mean, it's in the form of Friday Night Funkin', but still. And also just the very specific aesthetic that just brings me back to my childhood, and therefore making it even hit harder about the themes that are going on in the chapter. I feel like that is just something that, to me at least, speaks to me quite a bit. So, at least personally to me, I think the chapter is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and I could never put it like last place. To me, it just sticks out a lot. Also, I think this is something that I have to point out because I feel like this is just something that I can't really be ignored. Chapter 2 is one of those chapters that I feel like I've replayed a lot in comparison to the other chapters. So I feel like in comparison, it's just going to feel a little less exciting for me nowadays, just because of how overplayed it is for me personally, which is a bit ironic considering the thing that the chapter 3 is going for, but that's neither here or there. That being said, as much as chapter 3, I love it to bits, I will say that I do like like chapter 4 a lot more. I feel like chapter 4 was just pure cinema. So if I had to like rank it, I definitely would rank chapter 1 at the bottom. Not because it's bad, but because in comparison to the other chapters, it just kind of goes down there in comparison. Chapter 2 is great, so I would put it on third place. Chapter 3 is in second place, and then chapter 4 is in first place. So as far as I'm seeing, I am just winning. Like, it just gets better for me each chapter. So I am having a glamorous time, and no one can take that away from me. Anyway, now that we have that whole discussion out the way, let's start to actually talk about the poster. So, while I still think that this poster is great as it is, when I first saw the preview poster, I kind of started having a bit of a weird emotion to it as well. Mostly because I think a lot of us were a bit confused about why it like broke off from the trend of the other posters a little bit, and now we have an explanation as to why. But I think at the time some people were like questioning, wait, where's Ram, where's Eram, where's like literally anything about the chapter that's like that was actually like memorable or something. So it's better to look at my approach of the poster less of an attempt to replace the chapter 3 and more so as an experiment as to, okay, if Inina Matsumoto decided to actually go with the other trend of the chapters looking more like movie posters, how would they have gone about it, like something like that. Again, I want to reiterate, please respect the artist of these posters. They did a fantastic job. This is not made out of disrespect and more so love for their past work, right? The first thing I wanted to do was change the roles of the characters a little bit, because I understand why the characters are dressed up the way they are in terms of their own personalities. Like, it makes sense. Like, the cool cowboy for Chris, a cute little Rouse with the cooking thing, and the punk rock aesthetic of Susie. It works with their personalities really, really well. But if I had to, like, think about what stuck with me with each of their characters' costumes, according to the boards, those are just not the ones that I associate with. And maybe it's just me, I'm not a huge fan of Susie's hair too much. Like, it looks cool and stuff, but I don't know, something about it just irks me a little bit. I don't know why. So when I decided to want to do the posters, I wanted to think about what actually I associate the costumes more with the characters. And with Susie, I actually had an idea to put her in the cooking outfit because of the apron that says "Kiss me, my ass." I still find that so funny. But then I felt like it wasn't quite working the way I wanted to, and then I think about how much fun I had when doing the whole Susie Zella bit. Like, considering this was like foreshadowed in the second chapter as well, I felt like this has to be on the poster. I prefer having her have some fun as well, right? Then for Rouse, I know this looks like I did him a little dirty, but as much as the cooking thing is absolutely adorable, I do not remember Rouse in the cooking section whatsoever. And the rock version of him could have worked as well, but when I'm thinking about chapter 3, I'm thinking about this stupid ass horse costume. And I feel like it just represents the absolute chaos and whimsy that the chapter 3 has a little bit better for me. So I decided, you know what, let the goat be in a horse costume. I don't fucking care. It's funny. And then for Chris, like, look, I respect the cowboy look. It looks fucking cool. But when I think of chapter 3 Chris, I am thinking about the glam rock outfit so much more strongly. Like, it was part of the promotional videos where, you know, of like the rhythm game. I feel like it just sticks out in my head so much more that it's just insane to me to not go with this one instead, right? Again, no disrespect, but this is just how I personally experience the chapter. And to me, this is just the Chris fit, right? So the first idea I had with the drafts was the composition kind of almost exploding from Chris's reference point where it all goes like into an explosion behind them, but it kind of ended up not having a lot of space for a lot of other things that I wanted to put in, so I made a second draft where it was a little bit more explosive. By the way, I gave a little bit of a freedom for people to suggest what I could put on the poster, but obviously make sure that I just put in the things that actually make sense and not necessarily everything that people want. Sometimes you just have to kill your darlings. And one person brought in Lancer, and it was like, how the fuck did I forget Lancer and all this? Oh my god. Now, unlike Nina Matsumoto, who probably had like 50 different drafts in their drawer, I kind of stopped it at the third one, and that's where I kind of decided to just color key it and just see what works. And once I had like the final draft, it was like, this is the one. So generally, I wanted to have like the similar movie poster kind of composition where it like has like a bit of a triangle to it, but I went a little bit outside of it just because it was a bit difficult to compose. Composition is fucking hard, guys. I don't think you understand how fucking hard that is to actually wrap your head around. And to be honest, my blind ass still doesn't really know how to work with it all that well. Like, I know the fundamentals, but the fundamentals don't work shit if your eyes are shit, right? Like, I'm looking at certain compositions, and sometimes I'm noticing how I'm looking at the wrong direction as to what the painting is half me supposed to look at. Like, I'm looking at the wave, and I'm like looking at a completely different corner of where I'm supposed to actually look at the flow of the things. I am blind as a bat, guys. Yeah, I had a very simple idea for most of it, where Tenna would be, again, the one announcing. Like, I have nothing against with the poster doing it that way. I still think it's actually a really nice placement for him. I just decided to just go with a bit of a different pose to it in and of itself. Now, and then in the corner behind Tenna, there would be like the weather duo just having their own little love dance with Rules just ominously looking in the back. I find it so funny that people can't tell that Rules is in the poster because of the placement. You could absolutely call this a design flaw, but to be honest, to me, looking at an image and only noticing something in the last minute or something, or someone pointing out something in the image that is like so difficult to see, to me is peak comedy. I don't know why. I'll bring it up later a bit more, but the one thing that I do have regret over is the placement of Lanino and Lalina. I think I was a little bitter as to how big they are in the poster, and I subconsciously made them a little smaller in comparison, which honestly, they don't deserve. They're wonderful characters. They were extremely funny in the chapter, but I wanted everyone else to have a bit more of a bigger spotlight, so I decided to make them a little smaller. And the placement, specifically on Tenna's pants, I feel like it was maybe not the best one, because blue, funny enough, does not work well with black somehow. I'm not sure why. It just doesn't. Things just blend into each other. Seriously, working in black and white format is fucking hell. You notice how a lot of things just mesh into each other in terms of color once you put it on a black filter. It is hell. Something small I wanted to also point out is that I was trying to replicate the style of it just because I really like the art style of the posters, and can I just say, what the fuck is going on with the shading? I was trying to figure out the colors and the stuff, and the shading in it of itself, like, is it brush stroke? Is it cell shading? Is it just meshing into each other? I didn't quite understand what was going on, and I'm pretty sure I just used the wrong brush for the entire thing anyway, but you know what, it works. I like the style that I came up with in the end, but it wasn't quite the same one from the posters, so please make sure to follow Nina Matsumoto. They absolutely know what they're doing. I certainly do not. The other idea was also to have like the water cooler in the background, like being very ominous. Like it's very fun how it is in the official poster, just kind of floating around. But to me, the water cooler bit is still so goddamn funny that I feel like the ominous water cooler just kind of looming over everything is just, to me, way too funny to not have in there. I will say it probably should have been a little smaller because it blends in a little bit with Lancer's head a little bit. So that's definitely a design flaw. I want to make it clear, Fangamer would not have have approved this poster. This is complete self-indulgence. Speaking of Lancer, once the suggestion of Lancer came in, it was like, I had an immediate idea for Lancer, where it's like, the whole bit of him having like a bunch of controllers and having like all little mini Lancers with him, it was just such an endearing idea that I thought it'd be so cute if there were like tiny little other Lancers just floating about. It would have probably been funnier if they were just scattered across the poster, but this was already as very chaotic looking, so at this point it's better to just leave it at that. I didn't have the game characters in the poster at first in like the first draft, just because I wasn't sure how much I wanted to reference the how explicit I wanted to be with like the game side of things, but I thought hey, they kind of have to be in there just because it was also a very endearing part of it as well. The last thing I just kind of put in terms of like the character relevance is obviously Ram. Again, the original poster is obviously focusing on a completely different kind of aesthetic, which is variety game show host kind of poster. But if we're looking at the other past posters, the secret boss characters are usually like taking up almost a sixth of the total poster space. So I feel like Ram just kind of had to be in there. We can have a discussion all day who actually is the secret boss, if it is E-Ram, if it is Ram, if it's the goddamn knight. But I felt like Ram is so closely connected to Chris that I felt like it was justified enough to have him be almost like the main representation of the sword route. And just decided on the back to have just the outline of E-Ram just in the back to just kind of be the hinting at that route in and of itself. In terms of like the little enemy characters to put in, I wasn't going to put Shada in there at first, but I had someone really insistent on it in the comments, and I was going to ignore it at first, but then I thought about the dialogue that Shada has outside before the return of the green room, about the whole forgotten man kind of dialogue of that whole section, and I feel like that was justification enough to like bring him in, and then also the remote enemy and Pippins. I don't know, I found a little bit in the chapter kind of endearing about these two, and also each of them have a bit of a reference going on with the egg as well. So I thought, might as well put them in there. There's also a shadow guy, but I don't know. I was honestly, the shadow guy is very lazily drawn in it. I just literally just slapped it in there last minute. These little guys were really funny, but for some reason I just couldn't figure out what to do with them that much. Last but not least, the idea of the background in general was like a split between the areas. Like the upper area is more in reference to like the general game show look of like the green background with suspiciously looking stars, and then also like the light flare almost looking like a sun or something. I was really proud of myself for that one. It's very pretty looking and having like this fake happiness going on. I really like that idea in and of itself. And then having the red carpet. I wanted to bring in the red carpet in all the drafts, but just because I feel like it represents like the whole like glamour and glitz thing really well, and having this cord, and also like the audience being involved in the actual poster as well, I felt like it would work. And then the below would all be the kind of behind the curtain kind of aspects of it, like obviously the E-Ram section literally just being an outline, and in the other side there would be like the reference to like the glowing snow section of the chapter. The only last bit I included were like the gachi balls as well, just floating around across the poster. You can't quite see all of them all that well, and they are composed in a really weird manner. Some of the balls are not necessarily placed in really good places, I will admit, but I felt like these were also like a really good way to like reference certain things I couldn't quite fit into the poster implicitly, like putting in the things that you can get from the ball machines and stuff, and also like the fucking crown. I swear to God, the fact that for the longest time I couldn't figure out how to actually bring in Toriel and any of this, it kind of fucking baffles me. Honestly, the biggest difference between the original poster and my poster is really just the emphasis on priority that were placed on it, because you can definitely tell in the main poster they really wanted Rule's card to have like the biggest fucking spotlight, and while that's not bad, obviously I love Rule's card, but personally it was just funnier when I first played the chapter, and it was just a random moment before the reveal where Rules just asks if the weather duo is like single or something. Just the fucking foreshadowing in that is so goddamn funny to me still. So having him more loom in the background rather than being a major set piece to me was just funnier as an idea. Anyway, I did post the poster on Ko-Fi. You can get the original file yourself and maybe print it for yourself later on. It is free, but you can tip it if you want. So if you have some extra bucks and you don't really mind necessarily maybe giving some, little support, I would very appreciate it. But it's not mandatory. You can do whatever you want, babe. Okay, I really shouldn't say that after what happened last week. Oh god. You can give it a tip if you want, but absolutely no pressure on that. And also, I'm going to leave a second link because there is actually a little bit of an improved version on Ko-Fi. There was small things that still bothered me about the composition, so I decided to just kind of go back on it a little bit and make these very, very minor mistakes. They're really subtle. I just gave a bit more line art on some places. I reduced the amount of lancers, unfortunately, because they were a little cluttering in some places. And I generally removed the shine on Tenna a little bit just so that Lanino's arm would stick out a little bit more, and unfortunately that also meant to give him a bit of a smaller ass. I am so sorry, Tenna. I did not mean to get rid of your booty, but it was just too powerful, man. So I think that's it for like the whole discussion in and of itself. The recording in and of itself is like 48 minutes. Let's see if I can cut up some empty space or something to make it a tiny bit shorter, but if you just want to have a little bit of a a podcast, at this point it's more of a podcast than a ramble, I don't know. You can just listen to that in the back. So yeah, thank you for watching or listening. I have no idea if I'm going to put in video game footage. The only idea I have is maybe to fight the knight again, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I'm up for that. So yeah, have fun, get the print if you want, and use it responsibly. Do not sell it. I really hope that is not necessary for me to point out, but I have to say it anyway. Please do not sell my poster for anything, and also make sure to respect the original artist. Chapter 3, good. Love, Tenna. Bye.